3 minutes after, so we'll go ahead and start with questions that people have sent in. And you go ahead and feel free to type in the questions that you want. Okay. Here's a man that says, I get upset when my wife's oldest daughter, this is from a previous marriage of his wife's, I get upset when she comes over and her son messes up the house. So is that really about not feeling loved? We'll keep reading, but if you're upset, it's about not feeling loved. Is it so hard to not want a clean house? Because that's the way I was raised. My wife said last night that I'm constantly on her back about having a clean house. I know occasionally I'm unloving and the old me comes out and I attack her about the house being really messy after the grandkids come over. The last time that they were there, they took a permanent marker and wrote all over the banister. I know she feels unloved at that moment. I just can't figure out how to get rid of these feelings of anger, resentment, irritation, and so on. I want so bad to not allow these feelings to get in the way of my relationship. I was listening to Real Love and Marriage today, and Greg said that we cannot get rid of anger. I don't think I said that. But instead, we have to learn not to take it out on our spouse. I think what I said was not that we can't get rid of anger, because eventually you can slowly get rid of anger, but the idea is to learn to not express your anger at your spouse, but instead to express it at somebody else so that you can get loved by somebody who's capable of doing it. Your question was, is you're being upset about not having a clean house, or is it about not feeling loved? And it's really about not feeling loved, because if you felt sufficiently loved and the house got messy, it just really wouldn't be that big a deal to you. I mean, if you felt really sufficiently filled with what matters most in all the world to you, if you really did feel loved and the house got messy, you'd go, you know, so what? In the grand scheme of things, big deal. So there are a few things out of place. But when you don't feel sufficiently unconditionally loved and the house gets messy, then everything's a big deal. Then heavy traffic's a big deal, and a messy house is a big deal, and people being late is a big deal, and the dinner being over or undercooked is a big deal, and everything becomes a big deal. You're tender and sunburned all the time when you don't have what you need. So yeah, it is about feeling loved. And what happens is your wife has her daughter over, and these little kids, you know, who make a mess, and your wife really doesn't care about you. She lets them make a mess, and she doesn't clean up after them. She doesn't say to them, look, it matters to my sweetie that the house is clean. So you guys don't get to, you know, wander around the place acting like little pigs like you do at home. You don't get to do that. In this house, because it matters to my sweetie, you don't get to act like that. If you really mattered to her, she would do that. And what she's telling you is, you don't matter. And that is what's bothering you. It's the fact that you don't matter enough to your wife that she tells people that they can't act like that. You don't matter enough that she cleans up after them when they do leave. Those are the messages that she's telling you. She's saying, you don't really matter much to me. It's not the cleanliness of the house. It's the messages that she's giving to you about you. That's the problem. So it's entirely about love. It's not about a house at all. And my guess is that she gives you that message about you not being sufficiently important in lots of ways, not just about the cleanliness of the house. I'd wager that she does that kind of thing about dozens of things. Count on it. Here's a couple who writes that they've been engaged for a while, or actually talking about getting engaged, and been going back and forth about this issue for some time. And he pushes her. It's a long email, that's why I'm not reading the whole thing, like pages almost. And his issue is that she won't commit to getting married. So he goes on and on about how you don't care about me, you don't love me, you don't care, you don't love me, because she won't make a commitment to set a marriage date. Well, the problem is that the reason she won't set a commitment is that he keeps smoking dope. And she says, I'm not sure I want to marry somebody who keeps smoking dope. For at least a couple of reasons. I mean, A, it's illegal. Duh. And when he smokes dope, he's really not present there for her, emotionally speaking, and it bothers her. So, they keep going back and forth about this. He says, well, you don't care about me. And she says, well, why would I want to commit to marry somebody who's smoking dope? Well, this is a no-brainer to me. Anytime there's an issue that has to do with fear, whatever partner is causing fear on the part of the other person is wrong, and you got to deal with that. He wants more commitment. Well, that's just wanting something more. He wants to move to a higher level. Well, too bad. You don't get to say to your partner, I want more from you. That's a preference, and we've talked about this before in other web chats. There's a difference between a preference, a difference between a preference and fear, huge. My simply having a preference in a matter, well, so what? Big deal, we can talk about a preference. But if one partner is causing fear in another, we have to deal with that right now. You don't have a right to be causing fear in the people around you. Now, it's different if you've got a partner who's just kind of a phobic freak, and is afraid of, pretty much everything. Your partner doesn't get to use, phobias about everything to control everything in your life. But, if you're using illegal drugs around your partner gets to say, let's kind of hold everything and let's talk about this before we go forward in our relationship. Examples of fear, for example, using drugs in a relationship. Driving the car too fast, for example. That's not just a preference. I mean, if you're putting your partner's life at risk, you don't get to do that. Everything stops until your partner feels safe. So I would say to these two, if you're using drugs and your partner is afraid for her emotional, and in this case, even physical and legal safety because of your using drugs, it's insane for you to be asking her to make a legal commitment to get married while you're using an illegal drug. That's nuts. The two of your issues aren't equal. You want this and she wants that. No, not at all. You're scaring your partner. And you don't get to do that. So that's something you got to figure out. And I would say to her, as long as he decides that he wants to put the use of illegal drugs ahead of you, you'd be nuts to make a commitment to marry this guy. So do what you want, but if he's shown that he's willing to put that ahead of you, what else is he going to be willing to put ahead of you? Here's somebody who's live, that's live as opposed to alive. We would assume they were alive. Who says, Greg, this seems like a basic real love question, but I want to know how to get back involved in real love which I assume means that you once were and now want to get more involved. I recognize the power of real love, and lately I've avoided it, hence the nickname. The nickname being Runner. I'm having a really hard time getting back into it. My emptiness is unbearable right now, and I'm seeking imitation love, like an example out of one of your books. I guess I'm just asking for some help. How do I get back into it? I'm struggling with this. Does loneliness equal emptiness? We'll get to that second question. It's a different question. Well, let's do that right now, and then we'll get into your other question. Loneliness and emptiness are not the same thing. Loneliness is a form of emptiness. So emptiness is a broader category. Emptiness is simply not having sufficient real love. So emptiness is all of these things. Not having sufficient real love is this, emptiness, that big. One form of emptiness is loneliness, a feeling of not being connected to people. There are other forms of emptiness. Not having enough power, not having enough sex, not having enough, gosh, there are lots of forms of emptiness. They're not all loneliness. Make sense? So loneliness is just one of many kinds of emptiness, which is a bigger category. Now, how do you get back into real love? First, I would recommend that anybody who wants to do that, avail yourself of all the things that are available here on the website. I mean, read the daily coaching sessions. Become immersed in the principles. You can surf the website here for the longest time. Become familiar with the daily coaching sessions. Look at the archives of the webcasts. Look at the archives of the radio shows. Read the books. Become really familiar with the principles. And then understand that with the principles alone, only understanding the principles, you will not feel loved. So you've got to feel more connected to people who will love you. But the more that you read the principles, as you read them, especially as you read, for example, Real Love for Wise Men and Women is one of the books that will tell you how to find people who will unconditionally love you. And one of the best ways to do that is to, if you'll go on the website, you'll see, I don't go to the website very often, but somewhere on the website it tells you all the conference calls, right? There's a listing, there's a conference call somewhere in the world just about every day, pretty sure. Every day but one. And if you go on the conference calls, you can participate in telling the truth about yourself live. You can say, let me tell you about my life. Here's what I do. Here's what I'm like. I run. Here's why I haven't been participating in real love for a while. Here's why I'm a runner. Blah, blah, blah. Describe yourself. And you'll have an opportunity to feel seen, accepted, unconditionally cared for by people right then on the phone call. Even though somebody's not sitting in your living room in the moment, you have an opportunity to feel unconditionally loved. If you connect unusually well with somebody, ask them for their email address. If somebody doesn't feel like particularly safe sharing their phone number with everybody on the phone call, although most people will, then get their email address and then later get their phone number. Connect with them by phone on a regular basis. If it's possible, if you live in a place where there are other people who live near you, then meet with them in person. If you'll participate on those conference calls on a regular basis, you can probably participate in 5-6 conference calls a week. You'll have an opportunity to feel unconditionally accepted quite a few times. Then you find people one-on-one that you can participate in phone calls with. Gosh, you're going to have an opportunity to feel unconditionally accepted several times every day. So I really highly recommend those. The conference calls, individual calls, emails. Eventually you'll learn from the book how to set up a group wherever it is you live. There are oodles of ways to get more involved. Find out where the next seminar is, go to that so that you can meet people in person. There are an awful lot of opportunities. And if you still have questions, ask some more. Mesa, if people don't make us mad, how can someone make us fearful? Isn't it always about the choices that we make to be mad, afraid, so on? Technically speaking, people don't make us fearful. I sometimes, as a shortcut, say people make us afraid only because if we don't have sufficient unconditional love in our lives, then anything that happens around us makes us more afraid. So yeah, the choice always exists. It's kind of like if you're driving on a road in a car, the choice always exists to go left or right. Make sense? Every time you come to a fork in the road, left or right, the choice always exists. But let's say that you come to a fork in the road and you can go left, which is a fork that goes down, or you can go right, which is a fork that goes up. There's always a choice. But if you're in a car that has 3 horsepower and there's a fork left down or right up, do you really have the choice to take the fork to the right? You really don't. It's there, but that choice doesn't really exist for you. Do you see? And it's because you're not prepared to make the choice. So the choice isn't there. And so because of your lack of preparedness, the fork in the road really makes you go to the left. Following me? And so when we have so little real love in our lives, we really do get to the point. Should you make a little note for me? Fork in road, left, right, 3 horsepower. I forget these things later on if I don't write them down. If we're sufficiently ill-prepared in our lives, then it gets to the place where the little things that other people in our lives do really do make us afraid, angry, and so on, but only because of the choices that we have made up to that point, or in some cases, because of the choices that our parents and others have made in our lives up to that point. So sometimes I do use the expression, make us fearful, as a shorthand for expressing all of that I just said. Let me know if that makes sense. Mesa, my coaching client is thrilled about the effects that real love has had upon her once monstrously angry 5-year-old daughter. Isn't that hysterical how a 5-year-old child can absolutely control his or her parents? Amazing. I get to watch this everywhere I go. How a 5-year-old can control an entire family. Just makes me giggle. But my client is not as happy with how her boyfriend has responded to these principles. Angrily, defensively, denying that he's not loving, and so on. Why the difference between how a 5-year-old learns these principles and how a recovering alcoholic well-versed in the 12-step program denies that he's been conditionally loving? Oh, that's not hard. He has more invested. The 5-year-old has less intellectually invested in defending herself. And so you simply unconditionally love the 5-year-old, and she's just responding to this and going, I dig this. This is cool. I like feeling unconditionally loved. And so the 5-year-old responds to the loving and teaching. Whereas I'll make up an age, the 40-year-old boyfriend is going, no, I'm right. The 40-year-old has more time, interest, and so on invested an imitation love and is less likely to let that go. That's all. In fact, most people never do let it go. That's all. Alex says, I have a new office mate who is on the phone with personal calls quite often. By the way, there was a study done recently that studied the 10 things that irritated people in the workplace most often, and this was in the top 5, as I remember, people who make personal calls in the office. I put headphones on to help me concentrate. Is there a loving way that I can talk to her, and is this any of my business? Boy, that is just a really tough call. There are a lot of ways you can go with this. What I would, if this were my place in the business, what I would say is, if this were interrupting my business, I would do what you do. I would bring I have a noise-canceling pair of headphones. When I get on an airplane, for example, I work when I'm on an airplane. I don't get on airplanes to travel. I get on airplanes to work. And so I put on my little noise-canceling headphones, and I just start working. And I work the entire time I'm on an airplane. And I love traveling. People say, do you hate traveling? No. Nobody ever calls me on a plane. Nobody ever interrupts me. I get to work the whole time I'm on a plane. I love it. Absolutely uninterrupted. Nobody ever steps onto a plane and calls my name. It's great. So you could put on these noise-canceling headphones. That's one way you can deal with it. If this person interrupts you very often, it would be just like any other form of interruption. If this person were, for example, periodically starting garbage fires in the waste bin, would you put up with that? No, you wouldn't. If there were anything else that were interfering with your ability to do your job, would you not go to your supervisor and say something? Sure you would. If this person were coming over with a bottle of water and periodically dropping it on your paperwork, wouldn't you say something? You would. But we are all so spineless. And so I would just casually say, when you're making your personal calls and making noise, it interferes with my ability to do my work. You may continue to make all the personal calls that you wish to, but if you do, then what you're doing, because it interferes with my ability to do what I'm paid to do, then I'll talk to my supervisor about that. So it's up to you whichever way you wish to go. And then that person can choose to be irritated or not. But would it not then be your responsibility to talk to your supervisor about something that's interfering with your ability to work? Then they can be mad or they cannot be mad. And it's your choice whether you want to do that or not. We always have to decide what kind of price we're willing to pay for whatever we do. When we go to Walmart, you pick something off the shelf and you look at the price, $14.95. Am I willing to pay that or not? Yes or no? Are you willing to pay the price that it takes to get your office mate to shut up, or are you willing to just put up with it? You have to decide. Notice, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, here are some of the options. I don't know. But you have to decide, is it worth doing what it takes to get him or her to quit? It may not be. I don't know. Because most of the things that it takes to get them to quit are going to make them irritated. You have to decide, do you care enough? I don't know. Do you care enough about them being irritated? Do you care enough about them to get quit? It's a simple price assessment. But what most people want is they want to see an outcome with no price. Most people spend their entire lives agonizing over that. Here's what I want, and I want it to cost me nothing. Oh, well, there isn't anything like that. I want to go to Walmart, I want to check out with these items, and when I get to the checkout, I want to whine and complain and then have the checkout lady say, oh, we didn't realize that the price was going to bother you, so you go ahead and take these home and don't pay for them because we didn't know it was going to bother you. And that's what people do in their personal lives. I'm not talking about you, but that's what most people do. They go, and they complain. No, just decide what the price is. Do you want to pay it or not? Yes or no. And if you decide the price is too high, then you get to live with it. And knowing you, Alex, you get it. You get the very practical aspect of this. Me, I think I'd say something to them. Because I'd rather get my work done. Like with people with me when I'm on the airplane. If somebody talks to me on a plane, right while they're speaking to me, I say, I have some work to do, and I put the headphones on. And if people go, oh, well, I'm thinking, part of the price of my ticket wasn't being, your chat buddy. That's not why I got on the plane. Angela says, my daughter isn't speaking to me, but I want to let her know that she's welcome to come home for Christmas if she wants to. And yet, I don't know if this is the best thing to do, because a part of me still feels that she is wrong for not speaking to me. I miss her. Really understandable. All right. So, I happen to know this particular situation. So, the reason that she's not speaking to you isn't because she's angry. The reason that she's not speaking to you is because the relationship has become unhealthy enough that she isn't smart enough, she isn't loving enough, she isn't healthy enough that she knows how to handle it. She can't do it. She's not a healthy enough, smart enough person to handle the relationship that she has had with you in the past. Period. So that's the deal. Is the deal that she doesn't know whether she's welcome at home or not? No. It has nothing to do with it. So is that a question? No. So is there any reason for you to call her and let her know that she's welcome at home for Christmas? No. Because if she wanted to come home for Christmas, she would call you and say, can I come home for Christmas? Wouldn't she? She would. She actually needs the break. So do you, actually. And I know you miss her, but you'll recover. The two of you both need a break from the unhealthy ways that you have interacted with each other for so long. You need to learn how to be healthy apart long enough so that when you get back together, you can learn how to interact with each other in an entirely different way. You don't need to get back with each other too soon. Just like if you had a broken leg. And if the doctor told you, your leg needs 6 weeks to heal, you would not say after 1 week, but I miss walking. Yeah, I understand, but that's not enough reason to walk. Sweetie, you need 6 weeks to heal. And you and she need at least that. So don't be rushing the process. You'll be okay, really. She needs the time. You need the time. Let the healing take place. And as you both get stronger and smarter and healthier and happier, then when you get together, it will have been worth the wait. Whereas hurrying it up, you don't need any more unhappy interactions. You've already perfected that process. And Angela writes down here that she's laughing out loud. She gets it. Angela's a pretty smart lady. I mean, she's got it. And it's a kind of a funny thing. Most of us, we already know the answers to these things. We really do. We understand this stuff. And most of the time, we just need to kind of begin to hear the answer and go, yeah, I knew that. We do. We know this stuff. Let's see. I've been divorced from George for about 8 years now. I'm the one that asked for the divorce, thinking that I'd find true happiness elsewhere. Find someone who I could really communicate with. What did I know? I didn't know anything about having a relationship, let alone a marriage. In the 8 years, all I've found are men who knew even less about relationships than I did. Did I already read this one? I don't think so. In the past 8 years, all I've found are men who knew even less about relationships than I did, and emotionally unavailable men. Mostly, I've been too selfish to let somebody into my life. I thought it was too much work. I sort of think I did. Oh, well, we can just shoot me if I did. It was nice coming home to the dogs, not having to deal with somebody else. But lately, something's been changing. Over the years, George and I have remained friends. We both met at work 25 years ago, so we've known each other for a while. When he comes to town from out of state, he stays here at my house. On his last visit, I told him about, how selfish and unloving I was when we were married. And that opened up the door to him telling me his truth of not having relationships with anybody in the last several years, no friends, nothing. And he'd begun to think that he never would have friends. So now we've been talking and sharing the truth with each other. And he's thinking of quitting the business he's in and moving back down here. We're talking about having a real love relationship and seeing where it goes. On the one hand, it's scary in that we'd both be looking for jobs, and for the first time, we'd be putting ourselves on the line. But on the other hand, there's a sense of freedom in that we're starting to communicate more than we ever have before. He tells me that he's amazed about the relationships and circle of friends that I have because of real love. And that's what he would like to have. He's finding that it's too hard to do it alone, and that you can't get all the love you need from just one person, which is what these two did before. So the question is it possible to have been divorced and then get back together, knowing what I know now about real love? Yeah, I don't think I did this before. Sure, absolutely. Like he said here, I was divorced 8 years ago. So I guess the thing that I would suggest most is that rather than thinking about getting back together, I would just think about starting completely over. It would be like starting with somebody you'd never met before. Now, you know a little bit more about them this time, but, after 8 years, and especially since you've learned a whole lot about real love in the meantime, it's like you're a different person now. So I would recommend that he learn a great deal about real love before you get serious. The biggest mistake people tend to make is because they've known this person in the past before, they tend to think, well, let's kind of pick up where we were before. Let's become sexually intimate, for example. Let's get going faster than we would with somebody we didn't know, and that could be a huge mistake. So take your time, like really, really take your time. There's no rush. Tell the truth about yourself, about who you are now, about what you really want in a relationship. Talk about your mistakes, flaws, fears. Talk about how stupid and selfish you were before. And then gather information. I can't say this too much to people who are in a dating relationship. Until you're in a committed relationship, until you're married, the biggest purpose of dating, the biggest single purpose is to gather information. So then you tell the truth about yourself, right? And then you watch and see what he does. Now, it's not like a test, but if you're constantly telling the truth about yourself, gosh, I was selfish in our relationship and I didn't know what I was doing and I was stupid and that's why we got divorced. And if he just kind of nods his head and goes, wow, huh, and he can't tell the truth about himself, you'd have to be like some kind of stupid to get back into that relationship, because now what have you done? Now you're back into a relationship with another emotionally unavailable guy. That's why you divorced him in the first place. You want to do this again? So you just watch. Maybe now he's ready to become emotionally available. Like you said, he's amazed that you have all these friends now. Maybe when he learns what it means to tell the truth, what it means to feel loved, what it means to become loving, maybe it's possible for him to learn to participate in that process. But until you know for a fact that he's capable of participating in a loving relationship, you'd have to be insane to become serious with a guy like that and then just kind of hope that he caught on later. Don't do it. You already tried that. And you already tried it with this guy. So don't do it twice. Should my 17-year-old stepson, who no longer lives with his mother, but has chosen to live with his father, be forced to attend a family Christmas party, even if he doesn't want to? 17 years old. Well, forcing a 17-year-old to do anything usually would have a pretty black result. So my inclination would be no. At that age, in fact, gosh, when you're talking about, in fact, the whole idea is pretty hysterical. Here's a family Christmas party, and it's Christmas, so here it is, celebrating the birth of love, as it were. And so we're celebrating love, and we're going to force somebody to attend. So, no, probably not. You're going to invite the kid to attend. And if you don't have a family that's loving enough to entice a kid to attend a Christmas party, then, why make him? If he wants to do something else, well, then, see ya. No. This coming Christmas season, we've invited all the kids. We've got 7 kids to attend a family gathering, and they're coming from literally all over the world, and they're all coming at different times. Some of their schedules mesh here and there, and I don't think there's any given day when all 7 of them are going to be here. Who cares? At no point are we going to say to anybody, well, couldn't you try to change your schedule so we could all be here at the same time? The idea is, we love you. Come when you can. We're thrilled to have you here. We're thrilled that you would inconvenience yourself in any way so that you could come and be with us. Why would you ever make somebody feel guilty or feel bad for accepting or not accepting what you cloaked as an invitation, which really turned out to be a subpoena? Gee whiz. If it's a subpoena, go to court and make it one. We do a lot of lying. We need to be more loving. Pleasanton. Talking about coworkers. I have a coworker who spends much of her time being very angry. Gee, there's a surprise. We don't see much of that in the workplace. She gets angry over anything that does not go her way, mostly on the phone with other people. I have a good relationship with her. I know she's quite empty most of the time and have been kind to her, often even when she's angry about something. Any suggestions about how I can keep myself from being affected so much by her anger? Oh, sure. Would you be angry if she were mentally retarded? Really? If she had Down's syndrome, you know what Down syndrome kids look like, you know? I mean, they're physically, it's like they wear billboards, they're so different. And if she were mentally retarded and she, for example, broke something because she were clumsy or whatever, would you get mad? Well, of course not, because you would expect her to do that. Well, emotionally speaking, isn't she making it kind of obvious that she has emotional downs? She's sick. And so when she gets angry, you look at her and you picture her as, take your pick, which metaphor you'd like. Retarded, sunburned, drowning. Pick your metaphor. Now, keep in mind when I say retarded, I don't picture it in the demeaning way that we used to say it. Remember when we were, in school? You're so retarded. No, just retarded. She's incapable of reacting in another way. She's really sick. She lives in a miserable, unhappy world. And so it just changes everything when you see it that way. When I was a medical student, we had a senior surgery staff member who was like God. I mean, when this man blew up, people just folded like decks of cards right and left around him. He would bark and he would scream at people. I mean, everybody was terrified of him. And no matter what he did, he like carried a cloud of fear all around him. And yet he and I got along like buddies. And one day somebody said to me, how come everybody's afraid of him and you're not? In fact, remember, they said this to me one day because no matter what anybody did, he was always unhappy with them. For example, when you were operating with him, you tie sutures, and when you tie sutures, you leave little, how do I put it? If you tie a knot in something, you leave little ends, and you reach down inside somebody's guts and you cut the ends, And the little ends that you leave, you're supposed to leave just, little short ends, because if you leave great big long ends, it gets in the way. And if you cut the ends too short, then you can actually cut the knot, and then it comes undone inside the person's guts, and then later on, then it spills open, and then there's complications, and people die, and surgeons really hate that. And so when you're assisting the surgeon, you're supposed to reach down in and cut the little ends and leave it just the right length. Well, this guy's a stinker. And we used to joke. Well, he didn't joke with this guy, but I was assisting him one day, and I would cut it, and he'd say too long, and I'd cut it, and he'd say too short. And so after a couple of those, I went down to cut, and so I said to him one day, now this is the guy that terrified everybody. So I went down to cut this one suture, and I said, so do you want this one too long or too short? Tell me ahead of time so that I can know what you're going to complain about. And I thought everybody in the room was just going to fall over dead, either from fright or from laughing. So later, somebody said to me, how come he gets along with you so well? Or how come you get along with him? And I said, I'm just not afraid of him. And they said, well, why are you not? And I said, every time I interact with him, I picture a 4-year-old who's throwing a tantrum. He's absolutely incapable of treating people like human beings. He's kind of a combination of a 4-year-old who's a brat throwing a tantrum and the 14-year-old in school who's a bully, who's always picking on people so that he can feel better about himself. But the only reason that he's a bully is because at home his dad beats the crap out of him every day. And so he feels just terrible about himself. And I said, so when you look at him that way, there's nothing to be nervous about. He's He's just a little boy. And it changes everything when you look at people like that. So when you look at this lady at work who's angry at people all the time, and when you see that she's really just empty and afraid, and that anger is a response to fear every single time, it's really kind of hard to be frightened by angry people anymore, you know? You want it too long or too short? They're not frightening when you see people like that. Okay. Pleasanton says, I've sung a special loving song I wrote for my son from the day I found out I was pregnant, so he's been listening to this song every day for 12 years. Wow. Oh, I got to wait till you write the end of this. This is half of the comment. We'll get to it in a minute. Here we are. It says, I wondered when he was going to balk about listening to it. Last night he covered his ears and said he didn't want to hear it anymore. He said, I'm not a baby. It's annoying. Okay, so I'm assuming you're going to say, so what do I do now? Well, that's pretty easy. Like you said, I wrote a special loving song, but it's only a loving song to him if he wants to hear it. Yeah, here it says here, I feel that I should respect his wishes, and my husband said I should keep singing it. Please don't you keep singing it. In fact, it would be very much like some guy saying, I'm not really raping you, I'm just loving you. You think I'm joking? It's not. It's very much like that. No, it's really not raping. It's my way of loving you. Yeah, it's a whole lot like that. No, it's only love if the other person takes it as love. And it really doesn't matter what your intent is. So if your son says, I don't want to hear it anymore, you're done. Now, it's different if it's something that your son absolutely requires, like going to school. So it doesn't apply to everything. So if your son says, going to school is raping me, then he doesn't get to use that as an excuse. So he doesn't get to pull up this little archived version of the web chat and say, you're raping me when I go to school, because I could just see some kid doing that. No, if it's not an absolutely necessary thing, like going to school or doing chores around the house, if it's just something that you think is nice, like singing a song, no, it's got to be received by the kid that way too. Good call on your part to ask. Now, there are a lot of things that we think are nice, and boy, if the other person doesn't, like joking. If we're teasing somebody and we think it is, quote, just teasing, and I've heard that many times, and oh man, I've done it many times in my life, where I've said, oh, I was only teasing. If the other person doesn't take it as teasing, then you know what? It's not. Then it's mean. If the other person feels violated and they feel like that they're being hurt, then it's not teasing. And it's not good enough that I say, I only meant it as teasing. Then that's the end of the teasing. You're done. Mesa, my son is tormented because he has lost his faith and is addicted to drugs to cope with his depression and pain. Oh, boy. How can I begin to help him? Oh, that's terrible. Give me an idea how old he is. Two things. You got to tell me how old he is, and does he want to be helped? Because that matters a lot. So he's 28 years old, and now does he want help? Ah, he wants help. Well, that's huge. All right. If he's addicted to drugs, so I'm going to keep talking, and you're going to tell me what kind of drugs he's addicted to, and so what does he use, and how regularly does he use them? If he's using drugs like on a really regular basis, like as in he's using cocaine, for example, daily, then the odds of him kicking drugs on his own are slim. And he probably is going to need to go into some sort of drug rehabilitation program. Hate to say that, but that's probably the case. So you got to tell. Oh, you said sometimes. So if he uses drugs just periodically, then he's got a chance of maybe not needing drug rehabilitation. If he really wants to help, and if he lives anywhere near some people who are experienced with real love, then and he's interested in getting help, then I'd put him in contact with some people who are experienced with real love and say, here's a chance to change your whole life. I'd get him to start reading. I'd have him start watching the DVDs. You'd at least get a start to see, is he serious about changing? You can write me, or you can talk to somebody there in Mesa who is experienced also with real love to find out whether it's worth him seeing a psychiatrist, because we'd have to figure out whether he's chronically depressed or whether he's temporarily depressed just because he's been feeling alone and not had any experience with real love. But usually my first recommendation is that he get some experience. The first thing is he's got to talk to some people who have some experience with real love. See if he has a real interest in real love, and he meets with some people and he starts experiencing some positive effects from real love immediately, and he's really serious about it. Some people will stop using drugs, and that'll be enough to start him on a path to recovery. If that's enough, great. If it isn't enough, he may need to see a psychiatrist to get on some drugs for depression. If all of that isn't enough, then he may need to get into drug rehab. What I'm telling you is there's a whole lot of potential approaches for this problem. So we're talking about real love being involved, possible psychiatrist involved for medication. We're talking about possible drug rehab. But all of those things may need to be done. So my first approach would be with real love, and then I'd go from there. But I wouldn't recommend doing this alone. So get with a real love coach and go from there. And if you need to, write me, greg@reallove.com, and we'll go from there. But if you live in Mesa, you've got some people there who've got a whole lot of real love experience who will help you too. But that's going to take a lot of different people helping him. No one form of therapy is going to be enough. It's going to take a lot of people helping him. His psychiatrist advised him to abandon his faith. When I hear that, it just makes my skin crawl, which is why you never go to a psychiatrist who does therapy. Really. That's what you go to real love groups for. Psychiatrists exist to write prescriptions to help people with their depression and other things. They exist to administer therapeutic drugs. I'm trying to be nice. Psychiatrists on the whole are very poorly trained in doing any kind of psychotherapy. On the whole. There are a few well-trained ones, about 3, somewhere. I think they all live on an island somewhere. But on the whole, they're not very well trained. And mostly, I've had people complain to me and they say, my psychiatrist doesn't do any therapy. All he does is write prescriptions. Hallelujah. That's what they're supposed to do, really, is to manage people with drugs. I'm not kidding. Be glad that that's what they do. So, there's one more question down here, darn it, but we don't have the time. So I'm going to copy it and save it for next time. You had great questions again, as usual. So enjoy the holiday season. Don't get too caught up in the giving of gifts, the material kind, which just can drive people nuts. Practice loving people. That's pretty fun. So we love you. We'll see you next Tuesday. Bring your friends and bring your questions. Send them ahead of time if you think about it. And in the meantime, we'll be thinking about you. So we'll see you next week.